Electronic Arts was still a company despite gaming glory. Working for Electronic Arts, EA, was an exposure to a large company with deep pockets, and expectations that game developers were artists and needed to be celebrated and elevated to rock star status. But EA also had a culture that my executive producer encouraged me to embrace as my own, to be cool and hip. The executive producer came to me once and said, "Hey, you get paid a decent amount of monthly cash for your milestones. Some developers spend some of that cash on drugs and girls and stuff, you know. If you ever wanted something like that, there are ways to save money. Just let me know if you want some tips on how to do that. I mean, we want every dollar possible to go towards the game, after all." Of course, I declined his implied offer to set me up with drugs or a drug dealer or a pimp or whatever. It was weird, but I attributed his ideas and pitch to the entertainment industry influencing the video game industry. Atari Games and PBI Software were proven drug-laden entities, so I suppose it's not unreasonable to believe that EA did the same for its developers and had similar interests in supporting the dark side for creativity. So, a producer pulled me aside once and asked me, "Why do you dress so formally? I mean, you're in games. You should dress like it." Well, I asked that producer why he would question my clothing, and he just said I didn't fit in. That was odd. So I went back to that executive producer and told him my story. And he did nod and explained that my clothing, well, it was like a nerd. It was not cool creator clothing. I should at least wear some jeans, he told me, and I should definitely ditch the button-down shirt. Well, I kept the shirt, but I did go jeans and sneakers. And when I next saw the producer and that executive producer, they both exclaimed, "Yeah, right on, now you're becoming a game developer." It was weird how what you appeared was actually something to do with your ability to make games. More on Escape from Hell. It was pitched as The Inferno, based on Dante Alighieri's The Inferno. But that did not last. Marketing at Electronic Arts took over after the game was in beta. They created box art, back cover promotional text art, and game screen captures. They created the name of the game even. What? Yeah, that's right. Electronic Arts marketing decided that my game should be more understandable. No one knows about Dante's Inferno. They certainly have never heard of some Larry Niven or Jerry Pournelle and their version of the Inferno. Maybe they might have heard of Stig's comic book, The Inferno. But no, EA Marketing asserted definitively that the game could not be called The Inferno because no one would recognize or care. They said it must be called Escape from Hell. How did they justify the name Escape from Hell? Objectively, that is precisely what the player does. They said he goes to hell to rescue his girlfriend and his friend, and to do so, he must escape from hell. Okay, it literally made sense, but had zero creativity, and it abandoned the literary heritage of the game and its design. I felt that it greatly diminished the heaven and hell feeling of the game too. None of my feelings mattered though. Bing Gordon, the vice president of marketing, joined in, along with Trip Hawkins, the president and founder of EA. They told me that they needed the name to be current, so that people got it. They said that there were movies, like Escape from New York, a recent box office hit. So therefore, Escape from Hell was a name that would have immediate recognition and benefit from a halo effect from the movie's name similarities. I could only resign myself to a rose by any other name is still a rose. Therefore, an inferno by any other name is still an inferno. So Escape from Hell it was. The game shipped under the name Escape from Hell. My executive producer, Dave Albert, and I would often meet outside EA's main building and talk over lunch. Dave always chose one of two restaurants, Red Robin's or Bennigan's in Foster City. A funny side story on that. Dave asked me if I would state formally that our lunch meetings were necessary and productive, and they made me feel like an important part of EA's family. Yep, apparently, if Dave's developers en masse indicated that lunches were an expected part of their experience working with Electronic Arts, then Dave could continue as he had been doing for many years with these lunch meetings. However, without that support, he and all of his developers would be relegated to ordinary conference and meeting rooms for simple strategy and coordination sessions. How horrifying. Seriously though, paid lunch expenses seemed like an odd hill to die on. But everyone has the things they care about a lot, and he cared about these lunches. They were one of Dave's things. So how did that all end? Well, Dave was approved to continue running things the way he wanted to, which included lunches. But Dave also seemed to have lost some of his clout as things went forward after that professional conflict with his executive leadership. It was not long after that Dave was talking to me about leaving Electronic Arts to become a creative director at Sony of America, SOA. Dave did quit Electronic Arts eventually, and he did join Sony sometime after that. At that time, I was no longer working with Electronic Arts. It was some time later. Although Dave's career had some turbulent times, he eventually became vice president of external development at Infogrames Games Publishing Division. The last thing I ever heard about Dave Albert was back to his roots working with Brian Fargo. Yeah, he had gone all the way back towards Interplay, where I had previously worked on Star Trek New Worlds. Well, Dave in 2018 became a producer on a reboot of an old Interplay game called The Bard's Tale. I don't know where Dave went from there. Since Dave was at least 10 years older than I was, I imagine by now he may well be retired. Let's go back. Before the bomb and death threats came in for Escape from Hell and scared EA away from potential sequels of Hell on Earth, but after Escape from Hell was done and it entered manufacturing, Dave Albert, that executive producer, asked if I would consider an interim contract while EA waited to see how Hell sales went and if they would do a different game. Dave expressed an interest in keeping me retained by EA and thought a short contract might be a good idea. Dave recommended partnering with EA's tools and research and development team to work on shared game development suites of tools and libraries, any kind of game middleware that EA could have to provide to developers. He noted they were working on both personal computer and video game console tools and libraries. With my tools history and EA helping out, he felt that I could add a lot of value. As it turned out, I did make middleware for Electronic Arts that they would use in a lot of software. Ironically though, I did learn a lot about how middleware was built in the process and how to formally share designs and middleware with other people. I learned about formal APIs and releasing libraries and SDKs. I also learned how important documentation for advanced APIs was very important, and that things could no longer just be in your head. You had to have it documented so that others could use it, or you would not succeed. It's interesting. I had believed that if you cannot see and know everything at once, then you cannot program great things. You will be, at best, a competent copy and paste code modifier, not a real and true architect and engineer. Well, it turns out that almost no one can keep track of the things like I could. Everything that I did was apparently beyond their imagination. They did not have a fraction of my instant recall. I never had to think about things or write things down, because if I learned it, I knew it. It was just there. The most I ever had to do was maybe write an annotation in my code, like an intelligent name, so that it might trigger a memory for a variable, a label, or a function, or some dependency. Well, anyway, I had finished Escape from Hell, and EA asked if I would use their latest Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, development hardware and middleware they had been writing with. It was a great opportunity to explore EA's Nintendo Entertainment System development environment and their code, while deciding if there was a game that I wanted to make for them on the Nintendo Entertainment System. I did not like EA's development kit or its fledgling middleware. I felt that I could write my own middleware from scratch, and it would be far better than what they were offering to me. My code would be tailored to my needs, while theirs was generalized and full of fat and inefficiency that I did not need any of that in my game. Interestingly though, Electronic Arts developed a Blaster video game cartridge for the NES. That was a cool thing. It fried the console security chip. The NES had a security chip that listened to make sure that any cartridge plugged in was legitimate. They synchronized by communicating a series of numbers with each other, like a combination lock. But EA's cartridge sent power straight into the listening chip, and it fried it, so it automatically cleared all cartridges thereafter. But EA never sold their Blaster cartridge as they imagined they might do, because they negotiated a license with Nintendo that both satisfied their need for income and revenue and Nintendo's need to control the market and at least get a good royalty percentage off of the sales of EA's game cartridges. But the existence of EA's Blaster cartridge prototypes afforded EA leverage in negotiating better terms with Nintendo. Of course, that was funny to me. There was another reason EA did not want to proceed with their NES Blaster cartridge other than securing good terms with Nintendo. It turns out, there was about a 1 in 10 chance that the Blaster cartridge would fry not just the security chip, but the entire console. That's right, there was a 1 in 10 chance, 10%, of all Nintendo game consoles would be fried and cease to function permanently. That's right. You heard it right. If the Blaster cartridge worked, you could play any game without security forevermore. But if it failed, 10% of the time, no games would ever work ever on that console, ever. It did not seem like a great consumer experience to say, 1 in 10 chance, you lost your machine. When working with EA's Nintendo Entertainment System development hardware and their software, they also provided manuals. I discovered the demo samples in EA's Nintendo Entertainment System development kit were identical to those in Sculptured Software's official Nintendo Entertainment System development kit. It appeared they borrowed or copied each other's code and samples. Then later, I would get access to the official Nintendo of Japan documentation, and I noted that they too had the exact same source code and demo samples. They both stole the code and samples from Nintendo. It was obvious, despite their alleging that they created everything in clean rooms and were isolated, original creations. No, that was cover your butt CYA talk. Sculptured's own development in-circuit emulator ICE and RAM-ulators, which are emulators running out of memory or RAM, on the NES, and their supporting documentations allegedly created in a clean room and or reverse engineered, therefore did not officially infringe on patents or copyrights, were all lies. It was obvious they copied each other's work. No, I did not know. Did EA copy Sculptured? Did Sculptured copy EA? Did they both copy Nintendo? Who knows? But people were plagiarizing and stealing left and right. It is interesting that Atari Games had their own samples in code for the Nintendo Entertainment System, but theirs were not like the other companies. Theirs were original. Their development software was written in Forth, which was nuts for the era, in my opinion, but they had an engineer that loved the language Forth. And Atari let people do mostly whatever they wanted as long as things were delivered on time and they worked. I do find it intriguing. I wonder if I may be one of the only engineers that actually saw and used all 4 different Nintendo Entertainment System development kits. And therefore I may be one of the only people that actually knows how much intercorporate IP theft or borrowing actually happened.